What is going on, everybody? P4C, the podcast, a little pre-NFL free agency edition where we got a lot of quarterback talk. Daniel Jones, he's going to be a Giant for several more years. Lamar Jackson, some outrage from his camp, or at least his public fan club, and not having any interest from other teams reportedly ahead of free agency. And then Aaron Rodgers and the Jets, they're meeting up, and you got pitch clocks in MLB, and the Padres are spending money. There's a lot we got to catch up on since we last talked. So here it is, episode 111 of the podcast. I'm sure someone who's listening here, much like myself, has always feared the unknown when leaving something or contemplating leaving something. Obviously, relationships are always the big one. If you, what's life going to be like if I break up with this person or divorce this person? Oftentimes with jobs, though, it's the same thing. What is life like outside of my current role? And when you really get to thinking about that, it can become a really scary thing. So then that's how you see people that are working for the same job for 7, 8, 9, 15 years because they're just too scared to take the leap outside of that. And maybe it is a good thing because you do have a good situation and you don't want to ruin it. And maybe it's not your favorite thing, but there are some good benefits to it. So maybe ultimately it's not a bad move to stay in your lane and stay in your little bubble. But a situation like the New York Giants with Daniel Jones and signing him to $35 million a year, and I understand the contract details as far as like guaranteed money hasn't come out yet, and we'll see what that looks like here in a couple weeks once that, or really a week, once the deal is actually finalized, once free agency start, the start of the new league year, as they call it. We'll find out those details and see if it's as onerous as it appears. But all I know is that Daniel Jones, drafted 6 overall, who, I kind of like. He's an okay player, but from draft slot, number 6 overall, to contract now, the guy has never lived up to either of those billings. And the Giants, who were such a great organization, dating back to the 80s when you had Belichick and Parcells, they were one of the pioneers in the grading system and drafting of NFL players, with George Young used to be the GM, and he's legendary amongst the general manager circles. It's just a far cry nowadays from where they once were because they are just refusing to divorce their own guys. And I'm not even mad about them bringing back Daniel Jones. I like Daniel Jones at a price. Not $35 million a year. Saquon Barkley at $10 million. I like that a lot. So they did accomplish one thing on Monday in getting him tagged. But the whole Daniel Jones thing, having his reps fly out and just really being narrowed in on getting him to a contract extension before free agency, it doesn't make any sense to me. It really doesn't. Because life without Daniel Jones, it could be pretty good. You could go to Jimmy Garoppolo. I know he's got to stay healthy, but Jimmy Garoppolo gives a lot of the same things as Daniel Jones, and the guy's played in a lot of playoff football games, even a Super Bowl, and he's come from a high-level organization. Lamar Jackson's now to be had. I don't love him as a fit for the Giants, but that's the type of talent that's out there. It's really strange that the Giants, again, historically, have had great scouting departments and have had great general managers. I think they got a good one in Joe Sheen right now and a good head coach in Brian Daboll. Why are they afraid to let their scouts do the work? Once you let Daniel Jones go, now it's time to do our job. Now it's time to go draft a quarterback and find a guy that can play right away and just be serviceable for us. Who can replace Daniel Jones? That's not that tall of a task. But for whatever reason, they're scared about letting him go see the market. You know what I think Daniel Jones would find out is nobody's offering him $35 million a year outside of the New York Giants. So why the hell are the G-men doing it? You can lowball him, and you can get him at a cheaper rate, and then you can have a more competitive team. It's being stuck in your ways. It's being fearful of what's outside of the bubble that you live in. We've all been there, but I think a high-level organization in the NFL, you can't afford to do that, and the Giants really messed up with this one. It was a great day for the sports media activists who really like to put their philanthropist hats on. I was not expecting. This is one thing that I was truly baffled by. Was not expecting it. That the Lamar Jackson sweepstakes, reportedly, Panthers, Falcons, Dolphins, there's another team I'm missing there. Maybe it was the Jets. They're not going to have interest in pursuing Lamar Jackson once free agency starts. The Ryan Clarks of the world at ESPN, the Mike Florios of NBC, Andrew Brandt, Sports Illustrated, Mike Silver, used to be at NFL Network, even the local guys here, we're all baffled by this. And we're throwing around things like rotten and collusion. That truly surprised me that people are that radical with Lamar Jackson and feel the need to defend this guy that much. It's really not all that hard to understand. 2 years ago is when the Ravens and Lamar could have come to a contract extension off his rookie deal. Lamar Jackson was not motivated to negotiate. That's why it didn't happen. And then last year, about this time, Deshaun Jackson was signed to a fully guaranteed $230 million contract by the Browns, who are historically a moronic franchise. They've done a lot of losing in their time. The Ravens, financially prudent, analytic, pioneers of how you go about finding players in the draft, from Ozzie Newsome to Eric DeCosta, high-level head coach. They do things the right way. And it was after that contract extension that the owner, Steve Bichetti, talked about how Lamar Jackson actually needs to sit down and negotiate with the general manager. That's right. The guy represents himself, and he has his mother sit in on the negotiations, all of which have been fully guaranteed proposals from what's been reported. So when a team has to surrender 2 first-round picks, they know that the player is only seeking fully guaranteed dollars, all at or above what Deshaun Watson has earned. Again, a disaster train wreck contract. I can understand that maybe the suitors out there, outside of the Ravens, aren't all that interested. I know people love to pound the table because he was overlooked coming out of the draft, but this has just reached asinine levels when free agency hasn't even started. It's one thing to be reported. It's another when rubber meets the road, which we'll find out next week. I tend to believe there are going to be teams that are interested in Lamar. He's a phenomenal athlete. He's a phenomenal football player. Do I love him? No, but I think he offers a lot. There are some red flags, though. Like, what exactly happened at the end of the year? Didn't travel with the team. Head coach doesn't want to talk about your injury any longer. Maybe he was fully injured, and that's all there is to it. I know Rappaport tweeted that out a couple weeks ago. Lamar obviously posted the update himself. Maybe he was just injured, and that's why he wasn't out there. But teams do have some questions like, hey, did you kind of nurse that a little bit? Did you not exactly go full go on rehab? Were you not willing to put it on the line for your team? In NFL circles, people don't look at you the same when you kind of sit out a playoff game, if that's what happened. The other thing here, and I've been saying it for a little bit now, the guy has missed time each year because he was sick. The past 3 years, go look at it. And I'm not talking COVID sick. I'm just talking about like flu and cold or whatever, non-COVID illness. The guy just gets sick at the end of the year. So he's not only missing games because he's injured, because that's his style of play. The guy also just doesn't know how to stay healthy from from an illness perspective. So that's just kind of weird. You throw in that and the fact that he's the one negotiating and he hasn't been motivated to get a deal and he clearly is living in la-la land. I can understand where some teams are just like, I'm going to look the other way. I'm going to look at a different player. Because when you bake in the player and his scheme and the style of player that he is overall, you have to vastly pivot as far as what you're looking for as an organization. You build your team around the quarterback. He's a different quarterback. Very good at what he does, but it's completely different and everything is played off of him. So when you see that there are reports that maybe a team like Atlanta, who's going into their third year with a head coach, the Dolphins, second-year head coach, that they're not interested, yeah, because they don't want to restart what they've already done from a drafting and player team-building perspective. I know in a vacuum, people will look at MVP in his prime. What the hell's going on? When you actually get deep beneath the surface, you can understand where they're not all going to be interested. So from all the reporting that I see, Aaron Rodgers is going to play football. He definitely doesn't sound like a cat that's going to walk away and he's content. Usually you can hear in the voice of players. Tom Brady, when he was addressing the media after the playoff loss to the Cowboys, you could tell, like, okay, it's legitimate. He might consider it. I was somewhat surprised because I don't see Tom Brady going out on a loss, but, he did. He sounded like it at the podium. Aaron Rodgers is talking like a guy who wants a little of attention. When he's on McAfee and just talking about spirit and finding myself, like that doesn't sound like a guy who's ready to walk away from football. Typically, when you're saying goodbye to something, you're definitely pouring your heart out on what it's meant to you. He's not doing that. So he's going to be playing football, but the Packers, as I predicted, they're moving on. And think about how crazy that is, that the Packers, we're so deep into this that we understand it, but think how crazy it is that a guy that won back-to-back MVPs as recently as last year, 2020 and 2021, the team now wants to get rid of him because they're sick of the guy. They're sick of this, I'm retiring, I'm not retiring, find myself, pooping and peeing in the woods and sitting in the dark. Yeah, they're over it. This is Green Bay. This is not Oregon and California where you hang out in the offseason. We want a guy who's motivated, who's hungry. This is called Title Town. It's actually kind of nuts that we don't realize how crazy that this will be. A Hall of Fame quarterback who's still playing at a Hall of Fame level. I know last year he didn't have the numbers, but as we all know, when he's not into it, he's just not going to play. But I do think he can turn it on, so to speak, if he was actually a motivated player. So he's still at his peak performance. He's going to go to the Jets, and a guy who doesn't like to be pressed with questions that are kind of baitful. He's about to go to the shark of all media networks in New York City. This is going to be something to watch. This is going to be neat because you do have a good team. You got a Robert Saleh who, I think the guy can coach a little bit. I think he's a little rah-rah, and he's a little too optimistic. It's going to be interesting. I don't know exactly how those personalities will mesh, but he's going to have a lot of weapons. It's going to be a young team. And the guys that Aaron Rodgers has always been pounding the table for are veterans. Like he wanted Randall Cobb and Mercedes Lewis, and he's going to go to a team that's full of young guys who are unproven. So does that motivate him? Does that frustrate him? So far, I see mixed reviews on how this would be fit-wise, and I tend to be a little bit more pessimistic. This could go up in flames for Aaron Rodgers and the New York Jets. And I know it's not done yet, but we haven't even heard of another team out there that might be willing to take the plunge and actually trade for this guy. It would definitely have to be on really good terms for the team receiving Aaron Rodgers. And, for Green Bay, it's kind of a raw deal for them, but they are just so exhausted from this process. They're just ready to get him the hell out of there. Interesting. I'm recording this here on Wednesday evening, and I got Jim Boeheim, Syracuse head coach, is not returning and looks like he's going to be done coaching the Orange. And, I'm not the biggest college guy, but obviously you know who Jim Boeheim is and done a great job, won a couple national championships and just one of those legendary coaches like Krzyzewski and Roy Williams and Bill Self, just done a great job. But, that's kind of the issue with college sports is that you get these coaches in there that they run the organization, they run the school, and they just never leave. And, it could be a good thing if you still have the drive, if you're still hungry, but oftentimes too, it just becomes country club and, it's just a thing that they do. And, they kind of lose that edge of actually wanting to win. And while you can get some good players and that lands you some wins ultimately, you're not always hunting the championship. And that's kind of what I see with Boeheim a little bit. Calipari, I know the Wildcats have fell off. Again, I'm not the biggest college hoops guy, but that's what happens with these jobs, and it makes, on the football side of things, Saban all the more impressive. Like, he's just continuously resetting, like Belichick in the NFL. It's on to the next one. And, with college hoops, you're just not seeing that as often. But Boeheim, hell of a career, and hope the Orange find their next head coach. Thus far in spring training, though, Major League Baseball, everybody seems to be pretty compliant with the pitch clock that's been instituted so far, and we'll see in 2023. Obviously, I'm not a huge fan of it. I have watched baseball my entire life, as everybody else, that you just don't have a clock. It's not a part of the game. It's one of the unique things about baseball. I have been okay with the idea of a clock to speed the game up. This seems to be regulated a little bit too much, and it is just spring training, so it's difficult to gauge how this is going to play out because the games don't matter. And all I keep thinking about is the late innings, the 6th inning on, 7th, 8th, and 9th, when there's key at-bats, 2nd and 3rd, 1 out, 2-2 count, you have your setup man in, and you want to know what pitch to go with, and you have 20 seconds to make a decision. I know I don't want to see Shohei Ohtani versus Edwin Diaz. That's an interleague game. I don't even know if that's happening this year. I guess it does because of the new schedule. Kind of weird getting used to that. I don't want to see Shohei Ohtani and Edwin Diaz. I don't want to see that showdown and then it be rushed. And, one thing that I've noticed in watching these games is that when you have a foul ball and the hitter takes a G-hack and then his momentum is taken out of the box, he obviously looks up at the ball, tries to track it, and then he gathers himself and then walks back to the box. But meanwhile, the umpire, as soon as he knows that the ball is going into foul territory, reaches in his side pocket, pulls out a baseball, and the hand of the catcher is awaiting him. And the ball goes into the hand of the catcher, who tosses it to the pitcher, and the clock starts. So the hitter is already at a disadvantage. The ball is in the pitcher's hands before his head has even come down from tracking the previous pitch, the foul ball. So I don't like that the pitchers are able to manipulate this so much. And then you get a timeout, and then the runners on base can just take off as the clock is winding down. And, maybe this is just not being amenable to change. I don't know. It's difficult to gauge because the games don't mean anything. All I keep thinking about is when the games actually matter. And we're going to find out quickly. Like day 1, game 1. Whoever your team is, you're going to be watching a very close game where the stakes are high, and you're going to realize, damn, this play clock, this pitch clock is coming in and is being an element in this game. Is that really going to be fun? I don't know. Maybe it works out just fine. Maybe there's enough young players to where they adapt. The good news is, and I've thought about this too, MLB can work with the players union, and Tony Clark, this, bodes well for my happiness because I would like to not see a pitch clock. He is as old school as it gets, Tony Clark. I can see him and Manfred, if this isn't working out, they could scrap it by June. They really could. Now, the Major League Baseball won't want to do that, but if it's truly a colossal disaster, which I don't think it will, never know, they can just scratch it and be done with it. So it's one of those things that doesn't really have any harm if you do eliminate it. But if you can get the game moving, if you can generate more interest, I'm all for that. But personally, I just keep thinking about late inning, late game situations, and this clock is going to be a factor, which is no fun at all. I'm not much of a hockey watcher. I, of course, pay attention to the St. Louis Blues, and some of our earlier episodes were very Blues heavy because this podcast launched during their run to the Stanley Cup. I'll never forget. I was with a buddy out to eat, and it was December, the lowest point of their season. I believe they were in last place in their division. And my friend and I were out watching the game, getting a bite to eat, and I asked him, do you want to finish and watch this game? And he said, yeah, if it was a better season, I might, but with this season, I don't. Little did we know the St. Louis Blues would turn it around and win the whole damn thing. So absolute magical year. I'm now talking about hockey, though, because I'm seeing a couple of low blows. One, literally, a Flyers guy sticked a Lightning player in the crotch, and it started a melee yesterday on the ice, which I think is just, talk about cowardly. Of all the sports, I would never expect an NHL player to take that. And then also, coincidentally, the Lightning a couple of weeks ago, or just last week, a guy spit on another player. It's kind of very un-NHL-like. I've always kind of held them as the toughest of the tough. They actually put their money where their mouth is, so to speak, and they throw up their hands and they'll brawl. And I'm not, a goon in that. That's why I like watching hockey every now and then. But of all the sports, it's like, these guys, if you want to actually level up, they're actually going to put their hands up. It's not like the NBA where they, go to Twitter and start adding each other or subtweeting. They'll actually fight. So, to see these kind of moves is it's a little bit of a ding to the NHL, but still they're the toughest of all the sports, I think. But I definitely want to touch on San Diego Padres because they just continue to add payroll. And one of the things that I think is getting lost a little bit is that they are not a small market. They're not a big market. They're not Los Angeles. They're not San Francisco, but they're not a small market. I understand they're the only show in town. Chargers have left, but they got from a TV market revenue perspective, they're actually pretty good. I would kind of categorize them as more mid-market, kind of like St. Louis. St. Louis is a little bit bigger because they have more territory as far as radio and TV and being able to generate income that way. But they're more middle than they are small market. So it's no surprise that they can actually provide this type of cash, but it's also taking a short-term approach for a long-term gain. And that is having recognition with your roster. For years now, they're going to have Machado, Tatis, unless they trade him, Bogarts, Yu Darvish, all these guys that are under contract for hundreds of millions of dollars, close to $1 billion. And you're going to know when you show up to Petco Park who's going to play. It's a little Jerry Jones-like with the Cowboys. Everybody's wondering why they want to bring Zeke back. Because fans, they are related to by players on the team. And they want to know that their favorite players are going to be out there. Some guys don't really give a shit if Zeke is good or not. Some guys don't care how good and productive Machado is going to be when he's 38. They just know that they like Manny Machado, and that's why they're going to go out and see their team in person. That's where the Red Sox, they're acting a little too much like the Rays. The Rays have to be the Rays because they don't have the financial income to actually go out and get guys. That's where the Red Sox are probably making a mistake and not re-upping with guys like Xander Bogaerts and Mookie Betts. Meanwhile, the Dodgers, the Padres, they're going to be a marketable team, not only because they win a lot of games, because the layman, the common man, is going to know who plays for their team and know that they're going to be playing for their favorite team for a long time. So I really like what the Padres are doing. Is Bogarts, is Machado, are they going to suck here in probably 5 or 6 years? Yeah, but it's also not going to matter because $10 billion industry is what Major League Baseball is. And it's only gone up and up each and every year, sans pandemic, obvious reasons. The Major League Baseball app, fantasy baseball, all of that stuff, including Fangraphs, where people go to look up their favorite players. That's something that Major League Baseball is likely going to buy out. This is all stuff that they're gaining revenue each and every year. So I don't buy the fact that baseball is dying because the money is telling me that it's not. Maybe they're not getting any new fans at a younger age, though they just made some adjustments to how the game is played with the pitch clock that we touched on. That could change. But the money is telling me that they are raking in cash, and that's not going to end anytime soon. That's going to do it. Appreciate everybody listening. Next week, free agency. We're going to talk about all the moves. We're going to talk about our World Baseball Classic, which kicked off yesterday evening. It's at 10 p.m., though. I'm actually in bed this time of year at that time. No NFL games, no meaningful baseball games. I got to hit the hay. So I'm not going to stay up for the international game, but I'll definitely check out the ones that are earlier on in the day because love the World Baseball Classic. Nothing like it as far as countries across the world having meaningful baseball that they want to watch. There's no other sport where this could happen, and it's just a wonderful thing to see. So we're going to talk about that. NFL free agency. We'll know where Lamar is going to be going. We'll know where Aaron Rodgers is going to be going. A lot of great things happening next week. So tune into the podcast, share with your friends, and everybody else. Thanks so much for choosing the show.